Hi, good morning. Happy Wednesday. I am feeling really excited to start talking to you about a topic that is very close to my heart in the present moment, but I never thought would be something that I would be so interested in. My topic today is priestessing and women's spirituality. I want to talk to you about what it is, why women come to these ways, at least from my experience, where this sort of work takes place, what it feels like, what it looks like, and how I've seen it impact others' lives and how I've seen it impact my life. So first of all, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Emily. I am the founder of an online community called Radiance Temple. It's a sacred space for women to work on integrating their sexual and sensual self into their lives in a spiritual way. We do healing, we do empowerment, and we do integration into life. If you're interested in learning more about Radiance Temple, I invite you to visit my website at radiancetemple.com or reach out to me here and I would be happy to talk to you about what we do inside of Radiance Temple. All right, so priestessing and women's spirituality. First of all, I just want to talk about that because we live in Western culture. When I say priestessing and when I say women's spirituality, there's definitely a mystery around that. But there's also a question. Is this in the framework of Christianity? And the answer is maybe it depends on the woman, but it is not specific to any text or any specific spiritual philosophy. We have women from all backgrounds, all types of spiritual interest coming to these types of groups. And so they are non-denominational. And that is the very keystone of what I'm calling women's spirituality. Many times women come to these circles because they are feeling a sensitivity, whether it's like a sixth sense, they're empathic, they're a visionary, or they feel deeply connected to nature. And they are inclined spiritually in such a way that they want to know themselves on a deep level and understand true nature and the nature of existence. And I would also say that there is some belief that there's the force of light that they want to be a part of. They want to spread light, they want to spread life, and they want to deepen love in their lives, for themselves, and their personal relationships, and out into the world. So it is very much about the self and also the self inside of the group, which is a part of the process that I was not attuned to. I was not aware. This was the part that came out of left field for me and has also been one of the most amazing things that has ever happened to me. So I will share a little bit about my story. I have always been on a fierce journey of introspection, but also looking for answers to life's deeper questions. What is the meaning of life? What happens when we die? What is my purpose? I saw the pattern of life: go to school, go to college, get the job, get the vocation, and I just never felt like that was it. I even rejected that in many ways. And I started seeking different outlets, transcendental outlets. When I was a teenager and in my early 20s, it was definitely about mind-altering experiences, experimenting with drugs, and getting out of my mind and having these glimpses of what was possible with the mind. Then at a certain point, I found yoga. I was also in college studying philosophy and studying world religions and Eastern philosophy and practicing Zen meditation. At the same time, I started practicing yoga. And I learned Ashtanga yoga from a teacher here in Cincinnati who is one of the prominent gurus of yoga in Cincinnati. I took an 8-week new beginner course, so I got a very strong foundation. And it definitely spoke to me. It spoke to me physically. It was physically rigorous. The way that I felt in my in myself, in my body after class, the way I felt in my mind and my body after class was definitely something that kept me coming back. What I started to discover was the expanding of my sensory perception and feeling this multi-dimensional perception. It wasn't just these 5 senses. It wasn't just sight, sound, taste, smell, and touch. There was more. And that was very real for me. And so that was really, the beginning of like, what is this? What are we? What are we capable of? But I also had a lot of qualms with like essentially relating to people, but for sure relating to women. I never thought that I would end up in like women's communities or even like working to support women, but that's something that happened in the last 10 years and that's been incredible. Early in my journey, I was pretty closed off to actual like intimacy and didn't really know what secure connection was. I don't think we really had that language at the time. But I for sure was not living in that way. Later I can speak to in the last, 5 to 10 years, all of that has come full circle. All of that has come together and been an important piece of the journey. But when I started on my journey, I was a lone wolf. I felt like I never fit in. I definitely did not fit into women's groups. Any types of groups I would become a part of, I always kept a very strong wall up. And then at the same time, I admired people who seemed really open, but that just was not me. And that really was my path for the better part of what's now been like over a 20-year journey. That was how I operated. It was me in the world. And I would come home and sit at my altar and meditate and read and do yoga. And I would have these sensory expanding experiences, but I felt alone in my path. And I became very skilled at looking at myself. I became, let's just say, neurotic about looking at myself. And it served me in many ways because I came to know myself well. I can sense very subtly where my motivations are coming from, where my thoughts are coming from. Anyway, so that is a little bit about me. So I had met some women locally here in Cincinnati where I live who were involved in what was called the Priestess Process. And there was a period like 10 years ago where it was happening here and I felt in myself, oh, I'm already doing that in a way. I already feel like I'm doing that, but I don't need to do that in a group. I don't need to like go through this somebody else's process, like some person just made this up. And like, I'm already doing this kind of work. That was where I was at that time back in, I think it was like 2014. But as I started to awaken to my desire to work with sexual energy and to support women, it became very clear to me that I had some big shadows in relationship to women. So I started going directly to the charge. So what that means for me is there were some women that I would feel immensely triggered around in a negative way, where I would start to feel negatively about myself when I was in their presence. This is women, specifically women who are high achievers. They're beautiful, they're fit, they're crushing it at business, they have great families. They're just like really, they just have a lot of agency in their lives and it's working. They're high performers. Being around women like that would send me into such a deep spiral. I would feel all of not only the longings of these ideas that I projected onto these women of being like, I don't want to say perfect, but definitely having the things that I didn't have, or at least some of the things that were important to me that I didn't have. And that would send me into a deep, deep shame spiral. So while I was already doing a lot of yoga, a lot of meditation, a lot of inner work, shadow work, I still saw how women would trigger me. So that started to be a clue to me. I started to wake up at some point, like this is something that I actually need to focus on for a while. Then there were women who were, I learned later, it's called a golden shadow, but they were very open and friendly and receptive, and probably in leadership roles. This is for me specifically. And I would feel so much charge in their presence. And it wasn't that deep inner shame spiral that I felt with this other archetype of a woman. It was more like, I feel so much energy in my body, I can hardly stand myself around this person. That was a very interesting feeling to me that I decided to look at. I was already associated with some of these women through different groups and people that I had met in Cincinnati. I started having tea with these women. And I started to investigate in myself. And I would come out and say, sometimes, depending on the person, scenario, I started learning a lot about the charges in me and the reactions in me that would happen in response to these women in the world. And yet, I still felt like an outsider. I still felt so alone. And that was really, I would say, one of the very earliest things that I did that just showed me where my work was. It was the beginning of doing the work. But like the most wonderful things in the world, the work takes place over long periods of small changes. Typically, it's not like one shift, one moment, and then it's all shifted. When one of my allies, one of my sister allies, brought the Priestess Process back to Cincinnati a couple of years ago, I knew it was the time. It was very interesting for me because I was actually focused on cleaning up the practical sides of my life. As I had told you earlier, I was focused on spiritual endeavors. I didn't want to be that person who, when they retired, they didn't know what to do with themselves, or couldn't sit in silence, or couldn't sit in stillness, or couldn't sit with themselves. It was really important to me at a younger age. So it was almost like I took care of all of that at a younger age, and then at a later age, started like, oh, I better be focusing on these practical things because now I'm actually like, not happy because I don't have these practical things in order in a way that feels like the highest expression or feels like I want to have. So in 2022, for me, I was like, F spirituality. I am breaking up with yoga. I am breaking up with meditation. I am stopping at sitting at my altar. I'm going to put my cards away, my crystals, like all of that. I'm just kind of putting a pause on all of that, and I'm focusing deeply on the practical. And as I guess as irony would have it or synchronicity would have it, I also signed up for the Priestess Process that year because one of my allies and sisters was hosting the process, and it was an invitation. I felt something in me moved, like I got to be there with her. I got to be there. I don't know why. So when I showed up, the first circle, it was like, I don't know why I'm doing this, because for me, it's all about the practical. It's about how to make sense of 3D life. And so that really begins for me the story of making sense of what is women's spirituality. I remember going to circles and meetings and having different experiences with women. They're always taking place in somebody's house. And there's a part of me that likes formality, right? And maybe is institutionalized to believe that if it's real, then it needs to be taking place in some sort of like formal atmosphere, some formal environment. Well, I can tell you with all honesty, truth, and just the resonance of all that I know, that that is a false belief. Because what happens in women's spirituality is it can happen anywhere. It does not have to be a formal, institutionalized space. What happens in the alchemy between women who are focused on their accountability, who are committed to growing love, who are facing their own judgments, who are not there to compete with one another, but understand that another woman's success is everyone's success, who can simultaneously watch another woman that they admire grow into her beauty and into her power and reserve their own self-judgments and transmute them into unconditional love for self and other. Like, that is the container. That container takes place in the presence of the bodies and in the intentions that they are holding. And that can take place anywhere. And where it's taking place is in the living rooms and basements of amazing women that you will not see on the forefront of society because that is not what it's about. But I have a calling. I have a calling to share more information with the world about the absolute healing, empowerment, integration, and love taking place in these sacred spaces. So priestessing was a 9-month process. It's a spiritual process developed by a woman back in the 80s. Yes, I am an ordained minister, but it's really a journey that a woman goes on for herself, and also to build this community of women who don't feel aligned with prominent modalities of spiritual expression. We've maybe tried yoga, like me. We go to yoga classes, and it's there, but it's not fully this. It's not like yoga is a part of it, but the Sangha and the community that we create together and the alchemy that happens. I want to say magic. I keep wanting to say magic, but I have a feeling that you're going to start putting these images in your mind of what magic looks like. It looks like magic, but it is inner alchemy that takes place when you are in this container like I described before. And love is that driving force. And I would say, for me, I'm always trying to define, what is spirituality? What is spirituality? It is the upliftment of life force energy. It's the will to live, the desire to grow life, to contribute to life, to show up in your life, to do life. Like, what is that uplifting energy? That is what spiritual energy is to me. What takes place in these sacred spaces with women's spirituality is where real healing takes place. And it's not the kind of healing that keeps you stuck in your story of struggling. It's the kind of healing that actually allows you to shift and grow and move beyond, and can, like, the long-term journey. At the same time, it isn't this pressure cooker to be anything. You learn to outgrow the stories that you tell yourself about what you think you should be, what spiritual woman should be like, what life should be like. All of that just literally fades away. I focus on accountability, and I call this women's spirituality because it's very much about this inward journey. I have been to a church service. This is what's coming up for me right now. I've been to a church service. I remember specifically the pastor talking about, like, don't look inward, look outward to the Bible. Like, you shouldn't be looking inward. And I totally get where he's coming from. Similar to what Dr. Joe Dispenza teaches, we have to shift our body. We have to shift our minds. Our bodies and our minds will become addicted to keeping ourselves comfortable and in the sameness, and we have to harness a certain will, a spiritual energy to move forward, whether it's free will or the will to live. I don't care, that's not the point. But the point is, the body, if it's addicted to sugar, if it's addicted to comfort, it will keep you safe by keeping you comfortable, which isn't really, it's not always the healthiest place. So you need to transform in your life. So I understand this language and I respect it, and it does work. It does speak to some level. But what doesn't work is when a coach tells you something, or a pastor tells you something, or somebody tells you something that does not resonate with you, and you keep trying to fit yourself into the mold of that pathway. What we understand, a lot of the women who come here, and actually I would say it's very fundamental to the women who come to these circles, what we understand, what we know to be true, is that a woman, the more she learns to listen and trust herself, she is the way shower of her life. And she actually has an inclination towards an authority that helps her take steps in her life that result in growing more love, growing better relationships, growing more sense of empowerment, feeling more fulfilled in her life. That comes from an inner compass. It doesn't mean that we don't have role models. We definitely read and study and follow text. And I mean, I should just be saying I do those things, but I also know that the other women that I know who are on these pathways, we're always looking for our next teacher, our next role model, our next mentor, but it's always calibrated with this inner knowing and this inner wisdom. That's the main difference, I would say. And that is really the space of women's spirituality, this inner alignment and knowing. And so let's say I need to work on something like holding bad boundaries with my children, which is something I'm actively working on. I know that I keep getting into this emotional pattern with my children where I don't hold good boundaries around them to keep completing their tasks, and then I feel like I'm failing at parenting, and then I get bottled up with rage. And then I feel a lot of guilt because I lash out. So that's the cycle. How many times has that happened? I don't know, maybe like every Sunday for like the last however long. I know what I desire in this situation. I desire to have a positive relationship with my children where they are learning to embrace their responsibilities and they're held accountable. And they build confidence and a sense of personal responsibility in that way. So that's my desire. I can hold that at the center. The emotions come from some shit in my life that are reminding me of this feeling. And so we have these tools for working with different situations in life. This is the type of scenario where I know where I want to go, and the women are there to reflect back to me what I already know, reflect back to me that I can grow through this, that I can transmute these old emotions that are taking over my nervous system, that are affecting the way that my brain believes. And then I start to enact change, and it starts to change my nervous system. So that's what we do in a sacred space with women's spirituality. And priestessing has taught me the art of living ceremony. And we create ceremony for people at any place in the world that will allow them to feel a deeper connection with themselves, helping with the transitions in life, whether it's conceiving or calling in your lover, or your kids are graduating from high school and that's a new transit, like whatever it is. You know, a lot of times we're missing these acknowledgments in life and that sense of community, and the benefit of being around women of all walks of life is what is supposed to be. It is what is supposed to be for us. We are not meant to do it alone. And I know that this isn't going to resonate with everyone. I don't think that it is everybody's path, and that's fine. I just want to demystify what priestessing is, what people's ideas of what it might be are. And I don't even feel like I got into that too much here in this talk, but I will share more about that eventually. And I want to share what women's spirituality is. I think there's just a lot of projections from toxic propaganda that have been put on women from the desire of the church to become the dominant pathway to the mystical or the connection to God. So there are many, many ways of connecting to what we know as God, connecting to God, but there are also, it's a living process in our lives, in our bodies, in our hearts, and our minds. If you're curious about these ways, I would love to share more information about what we're doing here in Cincinnati or as an ally wherever you are in the world to help you find and express your inner mystic, the one who knows the way, the sovereign woman who feels empowered in her spiritual connection to life through her body, creating more ecstasy, creating more joy, living a life of what I call true pleasure. Has to do with truth and authenticity. Living a life with embodied sexuality, embodied as a woman, sexual freedom, feeling free to express yourself, that you know your body and you know your pleasure, and there is nothing to hide about that, while it can stay very personal and private. And a life of spiritual abundance where you feel always supported and connected to a sisterhood, to a higher power, to nature. We have all of the resources available to us. All we have to do is tap into them, but sometimes we need to be reminded that they exist. And that's what your Sangha, your community, your sisterhood can do. I'm using the word Sangha. It's a Sanskrit term. We use it in my Zen meditation practice and in yoga studios. The Sangha is the word for community. So anyway, thank you so much for listening. Again, my name is Emily. I am the founder of Radiance Temple. It is a sacred space for women to heal their sexual energy and integrate it into their lives and into their relationships. I would love to reach out to you if you're interested in working with me. I would love to invite you into my community and into my coaching program. Don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you so much for watching.